Welcome, I'm so glad you all could join me. I'm Chavah and you're watching Ask a Midwife. Chavah Benzion, and this is the Ask a Midwife channel. Today I'm going to be dealing with some of the physiological aspects of recovering postpartum after you've had the baby, and we're going to be going into the actual physiology for mother and baby of what's normal, and I'm going to include some helpful tips for your postpartum recovery. So we'll hopefully maximize your recovery experience, okay? A lot of the time a woman doesn't understand what's happening to her body. She doesn't understand if what's happening to her body is normal or if there's something to worry about. So hopefully through this video you'll be able to say, oh yeah, Chavah talked about that and that's normal, okay? For anyone who's interested, this is a book that I've thoroughly enjoyed. It's by Robin Lim, and she's a midwife and she runs a birth center in Bali. And this is a wonderful guide. This is after the baby's birth, a complete guide for postpartum women, and you'll get a lot of information. And if you're the book reading type and you'd like to forward your knowledge, then this is a really good, there's a bunch of really good books out there, but this is one I love. Okay? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to go into is what's normal for the mother. I'm just going to talk about one thing at a time here. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is your uterus. What's normal for your uterus? Your uterus should be firm and well contracted. Each day it will get a little smaller in size. You may feel the after pains in the first few days after birth as it contracts, especially while breastfeeding. If pains are really bothersome, you can definitely take ibuprofen, or you can massage your uterus. And I really encourage you to nurse, and as it will firm up your uterus and decrease bleeding. Okay? Now, the nursing will encourage the after pains. All right, and so that's something where if it's really uncomfortable, you can use a heat. You can put a heating pad, but not directly on your skin, and you don't want to put a heating pad by your baby. You, the mother, should be enough to warm your baby, and your baby doesn't need extra heat by him or her. Okay, so that's the uterus. Every day it'll contract a little bit more, and your after pains might last for a few days, a few hours. You might have none at all, or they could last up to a week. Each baby that you give birth to, it's typical that the after pains, the contraction discomfort after the baby, is going to be more intense, as each time you have a baby, your uterus gets stretched out, and it takes just that much more work and effort for your uterus to stay tight and firm and contracted after the birth. And that's why women who have had more babies often have more intense after pains after the birth. Okay? Okay, so what's normal for bleeding? I'm just going to read, this is my postpartum instruction sheet, and I find that it's really helpful to give a copy of this to the woman after the birth, and I'll put a link to I'll put it up online for you if you want to, it kind of paraphrases what I'm talking about in this video. Your blood loss in the first few days after the birth will be similar to a heavy period. It will taper off within 1 to 3 weeks, and you may spot for up to 6 to 8 weeks. Call your midwife if you are soaking more than one pad every half to 1 hour. Your bleeding should not smell bad. Call your midwife if your flow has any bad odor to it. It should smell earthy. It doesn't smell quite like a period. It has like a different smell to it that's kind of earthy and birthy and bodily, I guess you could say, but it shouldn't smell foul like an infection. Okay, that could be a sign of an infection, and you really want to call your midwife. Bleeding will be heavier in the morning, because you've been lying down at least for some time. Hopefully you've gotten some sleep, and you wake up, and as you rise up to go use the restroom, you're going to feel a gush, most likely in the first few days, as it's been collecting in there and will sort of spill out. Okay, so just know that it's not a danger sign if you're bleeding a little bit heavier in the morning, or any time that you've been lying down. And it might be normal to see a clot as well. A clot is like a little, a blood clot, basically. Sometimes you can have a dime size, the size of a small piece of money. And sometimes you might have a larger clot, the size of an egg. If you do pass a larger clot, you want to let your care provider know. And you might also notice some cramping before that comes out, and that's a sign that your body's trying to push something out. So sometimes when there's a lot of cramping and then you see the clot come out, and that's not a danger sign, but you should let your care provider know. If you want to minimize your after pains and your bleeding, then keep your bladder empty. It's good in general just to keep your bladder emptied, and you're going to find that after your birth you're going to probably be urinating a lot because your body has to get rid of a lot of excess fluid. Your body made probably 50% more blood while you were pregnant, and slowly over the first few days and weeks postpartum, your body comes back into regulation of its, of its fluid and of its blood level. So part of it, you're losing only very little of that blood through your actual, blood flow postpartum. A lot of it's lost through sweat, through urine, and just a general, it takes a while. It's normal to feel sweaty, hot. It's normal to have hot and cold flashes. It's a hormonal thing as well, that your body's sort of readjusting itself after the birth, okay? Your temperature, you should be careful to take your temperature twice a day for the first 3 days. At least, if your temperature is elevated, then you really need to call your midwife. I talked about rest before in the first section of this video, but I'm going to reiterate the rest is really crucial. You need to be sitting or lying. I ideally tell women, ideally for 2 weeks you need to be sitting or lying for most of the day, and you can be up a little bit, but not a lot. This is going to maximize your recovery. It's really hard. It's hard for the family. It's hard for the woman, especially if she feels good. The more rest you get, the better you eat, the more, support you have, the better you're going to feel, and the more you're going to be tempted to get up. So it's kind of a catch-22. You need to be able to say, I'm going to feel great, and I'm still going to stay off my feet, okay? Sometimes when a woman calls me and she says, I'm having, an increased bleeding, and I'm having cramping, I'm having a feeling that everything is sort of sagging, a pulling feeling, a pressure feeling, I say, how long have you really been on your feet today? Oh, well, I've tried to rest. And she knows she should rest, but that's the kind of language that I pick up on as a midwife, okay, so listen, this is what you need to do. You need to get off your feet. Go to bed with your baby, okay? Let's talk a little bit about food and drink, okay? It's really important to eat well. You need to eat, like I said in the first part of this video, you need to be eating 500 more calories on average than you did when you were pregnant. And when you were pregnant, ideally you added 500 calories to your regular diet. If you're a normal average size person with average weight, then this is important for you, especially if you're breastfeeding. If you're breastfeeding, you need a lot of fluid and really, really good nutrition, which means protein, complex carbohydrates, you need vegetables, you need your vitamins. You can also take a prenatal vitamin into your postpartum period. You should be drinking 2 to 3 liters a day, I would say, or more if you're breastfeeding. Healing the perineum, which is the part of the vagina that if there is a tear or an episiotomy, a cut, and you've had some sutures, some stitches, that's the part that we talk about in terms of healing. Okay, in general, you might feel all stretched out down there. You might feel stinging, you might feel burning, you might feel a tightness in the weeks, the days and weeks after the birth. If you have sutures, sometimes the healing actually happens before the sutures dissolve, so you might feeling a little bit of discomfort. You can get that checked. In general, you want to keep the area clean. You want to keep the area dry. You don't need to wipe. Once you've, urinated or had a bowel movement, you can rinse with sometimes women use a little squirt bottle. You can even use one of those sports bottles and fill it up with a warm water and just squirt, and you can pat dry if you need to. But your flow is going to continue to happen, especially in the first few days. So you don't need to worry about cleaning it really well down there in terms of the flow that's coming out. You just need to clean the area and dry the area, and then you can put your pad back on. Okay, you can go to the shower. You can have you should ask your care provider about a bath, but in general, a few days after the birth, it's a really good idea to do something called a sitz bath, which is where you actually immerse yourself down there in a warm water, and sometimes women create a tea, like a healing tea. That would be something to talk with your care provider about, or you can contact me as well. when you have a bowel movement, okay, first of all, let's talk about bowel movements. After the birth, you might not have a bowel movement for a day. It's not unusual for even longer than that, but you should really try to prevent constipation. The first bowel movement is often kind of softer, and it's not going to cause as much stress and pain as you might be afraid that it would. So what you can do is, if you have sutures down there, or you're just kind of afraid to bear down for the first bowel movement after the birth, you can create a little pad with toilet paper and sort of hold the area so that as you bear down to push, that area that received the tear or whatever, it has sutures or it's just really sore, that you'll give yourself some counter pressure and hopefully make the bowel movement easier for you. It won't be as hard as you think. It won't be as traumatic as you're afraid of, most likely. If you're really constipated, you can take something for that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about breast care for the breastfeeding woman. Okay, for the nursing woman. By now, hopefully you know that the first milk that you have in your breast is called colostrum. It's really, really high in antibodies. It's very nutritious, but there's not a lot of it, okay? You're not going to be, squirting colostrum all over the place. You're not going to be leaking a whole lot. There's just not a lot of it, okay? But your body does replenish it. If you've noticed that you're leaking a lot before the birth, you don't have to be alarmed or worried that that you're going to use up or lose the colostrum. It replenishes it. But along about the third day, about 72 hours after the birth, you're going to notice that you're more full. It could happen earlier if your baby is really sucking a lot, and it could be delayed a little bit to maybe the fourth day if your baby had a hard time getting started, or if maybe your baby was in the nursery and was unable to suck from you and you've needed to stimulate your breast with the breast pump. There are situations like that. But basically, you need to give your baby colostrum. Okay, don't let time go by and just say, oh, I'll just give formula, it's okay, I'm tired. Try to give your baby the colostrum. It's really, really important. It's thick and orange, and you can't mistake it. It's very sticky, all right? And sometimes it's like a clear orange color, and sometimes it's more of like a whitish orangish color. But either way, that's the colostrum, and it's really important. It's full of antibodies. It'll colonize your baby's intestines, the gut we call it, with all the antibodies that all the healthy bacteria that the baby needs to digest food, to form a functioning immune system, all the good stuff. Okay, and you can also put those drops of colostrum, those golden drops of colostrum, straight into the baby's eyes, and it will protect the baby's eyes. It's kind of like we midwives give it as an alternative we give the parent the option to do that as an alternative to putting antibiotic eye ointment in the baby's eyes at birth. Sometimes women use their first milk, their colostrum, and you can also use your breast milk as well. About 72 hours after the birth, you're going to have your milk come in, okay? If you feel like your milk isn't coming in, then you need probably to consult with a lactation consultant or somebody who you know that is really good with being able to help breastfeed, okay? It's really important to get help. As soon as you think you might need help breastfeeding, that's the time to get it. Don't delay. If you are not sure that you're doing it correctly, or you're not sure that the baby's getting food, you really, really need to check, because what happens is one day of dysfunctional breastfeeding can cause pain, it can cause blisters, it can cause soreness that take quite a few days to recover from, and it can sometimes throw a monkey wrench in the breastfeeding process that then you really have to then you suddenly have a challenge, whereas if someone could have just given you a tip, oh, hold the baby more like this, or make sure that make sure that the baby's lip is, flared out rather than sucked in. Sometimes the lactation consultant can give a basic piece of advice that'll really save you. Okay? If your breasts are hot or achy or tender, the breast itself, not the nipple, I'm talking about more of the breast, or you see red, it could be a sign of a plugged milk duct, and that can lead to a breast infection, which is called mastitis. A plugged duct is the first step in developing mastitis, which is an infection in the milk ducts. Okay, and sometimes they treat that with antibiotics. So you really don't want to even get to that point. If you have a hot or hard area and you're really, really full, you need to get help with the lactation consultant right away. The key is to nurse. So if you feel like, wow, it's really uncomfortable, I'm so hard, and everything is so full, you need to get the breast emptied. Okay, that is the key. Whether by nursing, whether by breast pumping, whether by getting into the shower and letting the hot water run over the breast and expressing, which means to manually by hand get the milk out, then do whatever you have to do, or if you have to do a little of everything. Okay. Let's talk about breast milk production. In the beginning, you'll have the colostrum, and around 3 days after the birth, you'll have a flood of milk, ideally. That's called your milk comes in. I got my milk came in, okay? Then you've got what's called engorgement, which is an oversupply of milk. That's normal. And as your baby nurses, your baby will tell your breasts how much to produce. If you have twins, the babies themselves will tell your breasts how much to produce. If you have a little tiny baby who doesn't eat very much, your breasts will probably make less so that your baby gets what he or she needs, but you don't have an overproduction. This is the way it typically works. Sometimes women, despite all this, will still have an overproduction, and sometimes the opposite is true. They'll have an underproduction. And so you want to specifically target whatever your own issue is, but know that it sometimes takes a few weeks for your breasts to even out. And so you might have some of these plug ducts that I had explained, and you'll need to get into the shower and really work with them to prevent them from becoming mastitis, which is the breast infection. Okay, sore nipples is a thing, and it can be caused just by the normal, babies are quite vigorous when they suck, and it can just be caused by the friction in sensitive nipples, which is really normal. If you have inverted nipples, the baby cannot be grabbing on quite right, and can cause some blisters or friction, or there are a whole host of nursing problems. And the last thing I wanted to mention about the breastfeeding is that there's a certain cream made from lanolin, and it's really, really helpful to put on and apply to your nipples if they're sore and chapped. It's going to really help them to heal. It's always easier to change or correct problems in the beginning, so just one more vote for getting help as soon as possible to maximize your chances of success. Okay, and it is a hard thing. Breastfeeding isn't easy, and a lot of women struggle, and it's really normal. Okay, and when you add breastfeeding problems to the difficulty of recovering, from a childbirth and becoming a mother, it can be quite profoundly hard. So get support. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the baby. We're going to talk about instructions for caring for your baby postpartum. This isn't an exhaustive list of everything your baby needs. These are just some things that you really should know and you should take into account prior to giving birth, things that you're going to need to know about your baby. Okay? The first thing is newborn behavior. Immediately after the baby is born, he or she will usually experience a period of alertness for about an hour, followed by a rest. The baby may nurse in that first alert period or upon waking from the first nap. Newborns will eventually settle into a cycle of alertness, nursing, and sleeping. After some days, but initially they are still on womb time, which is okay. If your baby seems unusually lethargic or floppy, call your midwife or emergency healthcare provider right away, okay? When baby's asleep, the baby will naturally be relaxed. But during the awake periods, the baby's going to be, crying, nursing, or alert. You're going to be watchful of any behavior that doesn't fit in with those basically 3 states, which is sleeping, crying, or alert. And then there's the nursing, which is sometimes a combination of alert and semi-sleeping. Okay? You want to watch for your baby's color. The color should be a nice pink color. Sometimes the baby will have a low level of jaundice, and this is usually fine. It's within normal limits if your baby is jaundiced around the 3rd day, 3rd, 4th day of life. If your baby's born jaundiced, which is a buildup of an element called bilirubin, which is a byproduct of red blood cells as they die and degrade. It's not important for you to understand exactly what bilirubin is, just that the color that it makes in your baby's skin is a yellowish color, and if the level of bilirubin in your baby's body is too high, it can cause problems. So it's important. This is usually one of the things that if you have your baby in a hospital, they're going to look for they're going to look at the baby's color before letting you leave the hospital or before discharging you from the hospital. If you have a midwife and you've been cared for at home, she should come on the 1st and 3rd day, or around about, to see what color the baby's skin is and to advise you. You should be aware of what's normal for babies breathing. Babies shouldn't be experiencing a grunting sound with any breathing effort. You shouldn't see their nostrils flaring. You shouldn't see their chest retracting with each breath. You shouldn't see blue or dark color around the nose or mouth. These signs would often be found together, and it's quite serious. That's called signs of respiratory distress. It's common that your baby will breathe a little bit like this. It's pretty common that when the baby's awake and alert, that the baby's not going to be breathing at the same exact rate all throughout. But you're going to notice that the baby, depending on the baby's behavior, is he crying? Is he nursing? Is he resting? Is he excited about something? Is he interacting with you? But in general, if the baby's just resting and experiencing a grunting sound, it might sound like this. Okay, that's trouble. That's trouble. You might notice the sounds of breathing change when the baby's nursing. That's also normal. The most important thing is to just really be aware of your baby and to learn your baby, okay? And anything you're not sure about, you can call, you can ask a friend who's more experienced, you can call your healthcare provider, your midwife, your doctor, and if you feel like you need to forge a relationship with a pediatrician soon after the baby's birth, then go ahead and do that. A good pediatrician is often a very handy resource to have with regards to these kinds of questions. Okay. We talked about taking the mother's temperature for the first few days after the birth. It's also important to take the baby's temperature. There are certain situations, albeit not very common, where the baby can have an infection after the birth and it can be pretty serious. So you want to take your baby's temperature, I would say twice a day, in the morning and the evening. You can take your baby's temperature by putting the thermometer in the armpit. A digital one is fine. If you want to do the old-fashioned way, you can also take it in the anus, but a lot of new parents aren't so comfortable with that technique. So you can put it in the armpit. You need to check what's normal in your area. If you use Celsius, or if you use Fahrenheit, either way. But generally, you take a half a degree off for Celsius and a full degree off for Fahrenheit if you're taking the baby's temperature under the armpit. Okay. Just remember that sometimes newborns have trouble regulating their temperature. So in general, a good rule of thumb is to dress your baby in whatever everyone else in the room is comfortable wearing, plus one layer. So if it's summer and you're inside your home and it's not so hot or so cold, you can dress the baby in the same amount of clothes that everyone else is wearing, and you might want to add a little blanket, okay? If the baby is hot, sweaty, or red, that's a sign their baby's too hot. Some cultures, as a matter of course, they overclothe their babies. Okay, so sometimes women come in for the postpartum appointments, and their baby's wearing like an undershirt and a pajama and an overcoat, and another layer and a blanket and a hat, and you have to. Poor baby, you have to take all the clothes off and educate the parent about what's appropriate as far as clothing the baby. Try to keep the baby out of the air conditioning, and you don't want the baby to be around a fan, or babies are really sensitive to drafts, to air. So just try to observe your baby and see if he or she looks comfortable. Feeding your baby. Okay, if you're breastfeeding, then you're going to notice that the baby doesn't have any kind of schedule in the beginning. Okay, we tend to think the baby has to be on a schedule. Every 3 hours the baby needs to eat. I'm not on a schedule. Most people I know aren't on a schedule. We eat when we're hungry, and that's okay for baby to do as well. Okay, so your baby eats, maybe he takes a half an hour to eat. Smaller babies, usually more early births, are often slower eaters. They don't have as much stamina for a lot of strong sucking. They take their time. They do a little bit of nibbling here, a little bit of nibbling here. Sometimes you'll find that you're sitting there for an hour and you're not quite sure if your baby ate. You'll get the hang of it. Generally, at some point, you'll notice the baby latches on, is sucking vigorously. Then you'll start to feel another sensation in your breast, possibly not, but then you'll hear the sound of the baby's breathing change, and you'll hear little gulps. You'll experience a couple quick sucks. The baby will suck a couple times, and then you'll hear a little breath out, which is the indicator of swallowing. You'll also notice that right here on the baby's under the baby's ear, there'll be a little wiggle as the jaw moves up and down to suck out the milk. Okay, so generally, if your baby hasn't eaten for a few hours, he'll be getting hungry. By the time the baby's crying, that's an indication that you've waited too long. Okay, the signs of baby being hungry are rooting. They're going to be, having their hands around their face possibly, turning to the side, opening their mouth. That's a sign. Okay, that's your baby's signs. And when that happens, you already want to be, getting yourself comfortable, bringing a glass of water or a cold water bottle to your spot where you're going to be sitting for a couple, maybe even half an hour. You get your blanket, maybe bring the phone by you so you don't have to interrupt if you if you want to use the phone. All those kinds of things you want to be thinking in advance and getting your little area. The bed is a really bad place to nurse when you're first learning how to nurse. You don't want to be lying down. You want to be sitting up with a well-supported, you want your back to be well-supported. Some women use like an armrest with on a rocking chair. Some women use a special breastfeeding pillow. Some women just put pillows underneath on their lap and put the baby on top, and that way their arms are supported. And some women are large enough that they don't need any support. They just sit the baby on their lap, okay? Whatever works for you, the size of your baby, the position that you like. Either way, the baby should be head aligned to your tummy, head aligned to your breast. The baby shouldn't have to turn his or her head at all. Okay, and that's a good rule of thumb. You want the back and the head aligned, coming straight at your breast, okay? And there's a lot more to say about positioning. I advise you to get one-on-one help if you can't figure it out, because it's very hard for me to be able to explain it to you, because I can't see what you're doing. Okay? Again, you can see in books and online, there's how it's supposed to look when the baby's latched on properly. The top lip and the bottom lip should be flared open and not sucked in, okay, like a fish. We call it little fishy lips. And the dark areola, the part of your breast that is around the nipple, that dark area surrounding the nipple, all of that, or most of that should be inside the baby's mouth. The baby will latch onto your nipple, and then with the first minute or two, the sucks of the baby will draw that areola, that darker, larger area of around the nipple, back into his mouth, and then he'll be able to establish a good grasp, a good latch onto your breast, and from there he'll be able to pull out the milk. Okay, and it's a process. Okay, as the baby gets stronger, as the baby gets better at it, the baby's going to become more efficient. And what used to take 45 minutes to do takes now 15 minutes. Okay, in terms of getting the baby latched on, the baby starts sucking, the milk flows, the baby gets full, the baby comes off the breast on her own. You don't need to pry the baby off. If the baby's not on properly, you can insert your little finger into the side of the baby's mouth and kind of press in onto your breast. It'll break the suction, you'll hear a little pop, and then you can reestablish the connection. If you feel like the baby's not on right, it's better and easier to break the suction and reattach than it is to try to, force more of the breast into the baby's mouth while the baby's got a grasp. Okay, so break the suction, remove the baby. If you need to rewrap the baby, sometimes you swaddle your baby with the baby has her arms again, swaddled to her with a blanket. There's a technique, and then that makes the baby more manageable in terms of putting the baby onto the breast. Sometimes you've got the baby's arms and she's up here with her hands, and you're trying to get the breast in, and it's really awkward because you need the baby to kind of get her hands out of the way so you can get the breast in there. All right? So that's something that was really helpful to me when I discovered swaddling. Also, don't forget to burp. Even if the baby's not receiving a whole lot of food, the baby might be taking in air, especially as she learns how to nurse, and the latch might not be so stellar. It might not be such an amazing, tight latch, is that she might suck air. And so you want to put her up on your shoulder and really give her a good, strong patting. You can pat her you can get her up there. The other idea is you just can sit her up on your knee and pat her, just using your front, using your hands to support her. In the days following the birth, you'll notice that the umbilical cord gets darker as it dries and it gets smaller as it shrinks. Generally, I don't recommend putting alcohol on it, but you can and it's fine. I've found really great success with just keeping it clean and dry. It can happen that the cord might fall off by the 3rd, 4th day, and it might be on for 2 weeks. It generally doesn't last longer than that, but if you've given your baby a bath and the cord has gotten wet, it will need to dry out again before it's able to really disconnect and fall off. The first day when it falls off, you might see a little oozing, you might see a little blood in the baby's diaper, you might actually open the baby's diaper and find that the cord stump is actually sitting there waiting for you. Those are all normal situations, and it's fine. You can just clean the area, okay? It shouldn't be, the cord stump shouldn't have a bad smell to it, all right? They do sell, and I've used with a lot of success, a powder. It's a mixture of powdered herbs that we apply to the cord stump, and it prevents infection and it really dries it up nicely. But you can use alcohol, you can use the cord care, you can use nothing at all. You just need to make sure that it's clean and dry and doesn't have a foul odor to it, okay? You can sponge bathe your baby. I immersed one of my children before the cord fell off, and it just took longer for the cord to fall off. But, you know, you'll use your judgment. It's not a forbidden thing to bathe your baby, but they just advise you to wait until the cord falls off. It might take longer for the cord to fall off if the baby has been bathed. Do bear in mind that when you bathe your baby, even if you just sponge bathe your baby, you're going to need to make the room really warm, because the air on the water on the baby's skin will evaporate quickly, and the baby can get cold even on a warm summer day. So warm up the room. The way that you want to prepare for the baby's bath is this. First of all, make sure the baby's fed, make sure the baby's rested, and you have like a very small window. So get everything ready, and then at your perfect moment, you know, you want to make the bath kind of quick, calm. You make sure that you're taken care of too, because giving your baby his or her first bath is kind of an exciting, special, and a little bit stressful experience, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So make sure that you've, you know, done everything that you need to do for your own self too. A bath isn't like a critical thing generally. It's like a thing that we do that's nice for the baby and feels good, so it should be pleasant. So make sure the room is warm, make sure the baby's clothes are ready, make sure the area that you're going to dry and change the baby is all ready for you. Because once you get your baby undressed, you're not going to want to stand there doing anything unnecessary and prolong his or her, you know, exposure to cold. So after the bath, you want to make sure to get the baby dressed right away and wrapped up. Finally, we need to talk about something really important regarding baby care, which is pooping and peeing, okay? Diapering, anyone who's changed a baby in the first few days of life has seen meconium. Meconium is a fancy word that indicates that black, tarry, really sticky, incredible first baby poop. There's nothing quite like it. I guess you could liken it to tar, although most of us haven't really experienced tar firsthand. It doesn't have a smell. It's actually pretty clean stuff despite how it looks, but it comes out of the baby, you know, at birth sometimes. In the first few days, the baby will pass, hopefully, a lot of meconium. The bilirubin that I talked about that causes jaundice, a lot of that bilirubin is actually found in the first baby poop, in the meconium. So after the baby passes all this sticky meconium, you're going to see the baby's poop start to change to a color of normal breastfed baby poop, which is a mustardy yellow color, and that's the normal color of baby poop, okay? In general, what you want to expect in the first few days is the baby will pass urine and meconium within the first 24 hours, and every day of the baby's life you'll get to see more and more dirty diapers and wet diapers as the baby eats more. And over the first few days, that dark, sticky poop will change into a browner. First it'll go to green, and then to brown, and then eventually to yellow. And that might happen in the first few days, and it might take a few more days, especially if you're breastfeeding and the milk doesn't come in until, you know, the 3rd or 4th day. If you're formula feeding, you're going to notice that change happens sooner, as the formula really stimulates the baby to get out all that meconium and poop a lot more. And that's why you'll see that probably sooner. The meconium is messy, and so in order for a quick cleanup, my tip is for you to Put a little bit of almond oil or even olive oil if you have it around the baby, on the baby's bottom, and that will encourage that sticky meconium to stick to the diaper and not to the baby. You can always rinse the baby's bottom with warm water. That's okay to do. You're going to notice that the baby's going to pee more as the milk comes in, and that's also normal and healthy and good. And you might have to really try to investigate their diaper in the first few days, because they don't pee a lot, but you need to really see that they are making some wet diapers, so you'll need to sort of get in there and see. Sometimes they even have special diapers that change color if the baby pees. I don't know about that. I just know that you'll feel a little bit of a thickening in the diaper itself, because they're really designed to trap fluid, and they hardly even feel wet. If you're using cloth, well, then it's a whole lot easier to tell if the baby's wet. Just a tip that when you're using cloth diapers, those first few days of meconium, you might actually want to use disposable for the first few days, and that way it makes for a lot easier cleaning up. After the meconium is passed out of the baby's system, then it's easier to start using the cloth. As with everything during your childbearing experience, you are encouraged to call your midwife with any questions, enjoy your family, and get acquainted with your wonderful new addition. This is a basic guide. I hope it's covered a lot of what you worried about, wondered about. I hope you were happy with the information. If you need more clarification, you can write me. I really encourage you to make use of this video if you need to watch it a few more times. Hopefully it gave you what you needed. Hopefully it really validated your feelings, your experience. Hopefully it empowered you to be proactive in preparing. If you haven't yet had the baby, you might have heard some things today that you were like, okay, so that means I need to do A, B, or C in order to prepare. Get your food in order, get your support system in order, get your nest in order, make sure that you have what you need, that you're set up, that you can have a low stress and wonderful, loving, nurturing, gentle postpartum period. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to call your care provider. Don't be afraid to cry. And if you need to complain, that's okay too, but just know that overall, most people don't have every challenge, but most people almost always have a few challenges. So whatever challenge you'll be getting is you're going to learn from it, you're going to overcome it. Ideally, it's going to make you a better mother, but a better parent. And I just give you I wish for you a lot of strength and a lot of endurance and a lot of stamina, that you would be able to really rise to the occasion and enjoy your postpartum experience. Okay, thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed today's video, it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe to the Ask a Midwife channel. I'm trying to build a higher level of subscribers so that I can get the word out to more people. So if you know someone that could benefit from this video, please share it. And if you liked it, you can let me know that you liked it, and I appreciate comments. So thanks so much. Thanks for watching.